because we wanted to share more things together. And so I wanted to be able to say that I don't like when people just slip away and haven't said goodbye. So I knew that this would be my first chance to be back with you since that decision. And I did want to say my heart is with you, my respect and my enjoyment of all things you is still with you, and we're appreciating time together perspective. So we'll just stand that. And then Eric, are we?
Yeah, let's get you set up.
Well, and I'm wondering, can we move the table forward since everybody kind of gravitated towards the sun? Is it? I want to do it very carefully so we don't.
Why don't we move everything?
Yeah, move it forward. And if the book, that's
This one.
there we go.
There you go.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. There's plenty of room. Thank you.
Sure.
That's better. Feel like
Wonderful.
So I've prepared some things that I'd like to share because this would be an easy way for me to refer to
Is that
them.
mic
So,
working?
it's just for recording.
Oh, I'm having trouble hearing. Yeah, me too.
Okay,
You
then I
might
will
need to
say-
move up.
Yeah, let's move up.
Shall I?
I'm gonna move up. Like Wayne said, everybody.
This is a good test for figuring out how we do this.
Yeah, we're only on outdoor speakers.
Hello. Well, I want to open our conversation today by telling you a bit of the why of this story. Encounter, when religions become classmates from Oregon to India and back. Why I wrote it as a young adult novel, and why and how the story unfolded as it did. Then I want us to ponder some questions together, themes that come out of the book, and then if anyone needs a copy, I'm going to hang around and I have brought some copies of the book too. So. But first I want to read a bit from the opening page, and actually I'm going to read the dedication here. This book is dedicated to the spirit of wondering that is within each of us. So that is one of the themes, curiosity and wondering. Annie stepped out of the plane into the warm Mumbai night. She had expected to go directly into an airport transit room, unable to see India until they reached Hyderabad. But here she was at the top of the stairway, looking out over the tarmac at the Mumbai terminal. What was I thinking? She whispered to herself. The family she had joined up with in LA, friends of friends, moved down the steps in front of her. The woman looked back up at Annie and told her for the fourth time, just follow the transit crowd. They'll soon have you off for Hyderabad, just an hour's flight onward. I'll be fine, Annie said, trying to sound convincing. Thank you so much for letting me travel with you. She paused on the bottom step and watched the LA family join those going in another direction, leaving her alone in the crowd on the other side of the world. That was the plan, of course. They would go on by train to visit family in Pune. Annie would catch a connecting flight to Hyderabad, but as she touched her foot to the ground, the feeling washed over her again, that her parents' first reaction might be right, that she should have just watched some movies about India for now, and then come when she was in college, that maybe this was a mistake. She could have been completely happy finishing her junior year right there in Ridgeway with friends she had known since kindergarten. The transit crowd moved quickly ahead. Annie rushed to catch up. As she walked toward the Mumbai terminal, the thought crossed her mind that even after all she'd done to get here, she'd actually rather be leaving India for Oregon with this semester somehow already over. She forced the thought away with, I wonder. It was a good time to try out her pledge, to be open and curious and wonder instead of being afraid or instantly judging what seemed too different. Suddenly the words were there to finish the sentence. I wonder why that lady is kneeling, touching her hands to the ground and then to her forehead. Annie watched and saw tears in the woman's eyes as she stood up. Maybe she's coming home, Annie thought. It actually was a mistake of sorts, Annie's being there. She had never intended to come, just like she had never intended to be one of the winners of a national scholarship essay contest. It was just an assignment Mr. Snyder made their class do. Her mom and dad had no idea Annie had entered any contest. When they found out she'd won, they were dumbfounded. What was Mr. Snyder thinking? They asked Annie. Her mom didn't wait for an answer, but went straight to the phone and called the school. Mr. Snyder had left for the weekend, so she talked to the secretary, Elaine, and asked her to leave a message for Mr. Thompson and Mr. Snyder to let them know first thing Monday morning that Annie would not be accepting any scholarship to go to India. Annie spent most of that Saturday searching the internet and found that one of the two schools participating in the India Scholarship Program was an international, multicultural Christian school. She decided that was the one she would try for, thinking it might sway her parents to be more receptive to the idea. They finally did agree to look at the school's website and think it over, though Annie was sure it was just to prove to her they were listening and that they hadn't already decided she couldn't go. Annie was ready for change. She loved Ridgeway High, but there were so many times that she just couldn't push away the screaming ache inside. Her mom and dad had both told her that time would help, but it was the opposite. Annie was angry and more confused than ever. Any little thing could have stopped that accident. If God had any power at all, it wouldn't have happened. If only Annie had not insisted on a party in a corn maze, life would be so different. She had just stopped talking about it and had let them think they were right, that time was helping. But it hovered like a black cloud over everything she did, everywhere she went, everything she thought about. Now back to the questions. Why this book? Why I wrote it? I think the answer to that for me is simply sometimes something happens and they're just too powerful to leave untold. And I love to share a story. The full truth is there were encounters that I saw happening to others, to me, and to our family, and they were life changers. There were unanswered questions that I wanted to ponder, and I think probably the biggest reason is that I have a longing for our world to see how much we have in common, and that rather than fighting with each other or pushing each other aside, if we discover that, we have so much more joy and so much more fun. And even if it's with people we don't know, why wouldn't we give ourselves that right, that amazing opportunity? And so I wanted this book to help build a sense of belonging to each other, and I took on the story. There are many encounters that the protagonist, Annie, experiences, but one, the primary one, I think, is her encounter with those of faiths other than Christianity. She grew up pretty much accepting that as the way. She described it as a box she was given as a little kid, all tied up with beautiful ribbons, and she took that as hers, unquestioned, until the boy, Param, came to Ridgeway High her sophomore year, and things changed. Yes, I was aware that things get tricky, even stories being told when religion enters the scene, especially when that religion is defined pretty much as the truth that would work for everyone if they just gave their heart to it. I think UU has worked that out in a very beautiful way. But there are so many that do hold to the exclusive truth of their own faith, and that was a challenge I was willing to take on. And I began to wonder if perhaps for UUers, the encounter is with diversity of those who might hold that belief, and how we interact with that. Annie's family is cool. They do happen to be Christian, and in the case of their mom, quite sure how things need to be done. And we see Annie, there were times in the early part of the story I thought, ooh, nobody's gonna like her. this girl has a lot to grow into, but still she's passionate, she loves life, she runs just to keep things going, and she accepts a new kid who happens to be beautiful and fun and kind, and she opens up to that story. So however diversity is defined for us, I think that this story can open that in several ways. I didn't think about it as my story as it was being written. Maybe because it's in current time, not in the old days when I was in high school. The characters didn't seem like me. They weren't like me. But eventually I began to see, you know what, there is a lot of me in that story. And I didn't especially like what I found. For me personally, the big encounters in my life began right after college, stopping in Mumbai, India, on a semester at sea university program on a ship, and being there long enough to meet some very kind people who sparked a curiosity within me to learn more about India, and maybe even come back someday. Then, following my big sister's lead in joining the Peace Corps, I returned to India a few years later with my husband of one whole year as Peace Corps volunteers in kitchen gardening, and soaking in the friendship of a Muslim family in one village. These people. and here's a picture. It's just, on the shelf in my room as I was coming down, and I thought we had a taffy pull with them. And taffy probably isn't the best thing with all the sugar, but it was a tradition we loved at Christmas time. So when they came to see us where we were living, we pulled taffy. And this is a book that I compiled for them and us. 2 families, 1 heart. And yeah, they welcomed us when we were brand new in the Peace Corps. We then changed villages a year later, and we lived in the compound of a Hindu family and became a part of that experience with them. After that, we knew we would never be the same as we were, and actually our practice of religion would never be the same as it was. Another huge encounter was returning to India to work at Kodaikanal International School in Tamil Nadu, along with our kids. This was coming back for the second time. Kip was actually born there, so this was when we returned when he was in 4th grade. That's near Hyderabad where Annie came in. And this is Kip celebrating Holi. And when he felt that, it's hard here, and Mom and Dad didn't tell me there were hard things. They just talked about how much this place was awesome and how wonderful it was. And things were hard. And then he discovered that there are tops to be thrown. And there's Holi and colors. And before we left, he had me go to the bazaar and get a bunch of these this powdered color, because he was sure that people would want to throw colored water on each other at home. And he bought a whole bag of chalks to bring back, knowing that he would want to share that with his classmates. So things changed, and Cody gave him some wonderful experiences. Cody Connolly is very much like Mega Malai, the school that Annie attends when I needed a place that wouldn't be the exact place. Of course, there were other things. Pondering why it happened that two brothers in my high school in different years were killed by falling trees and how their parents could have possibly managed. What it was like for their cousin who didn't get her homework done and wished with all her heart that something would happen that would keep her from having to go to school, so that she wouldn't have to be asked to turn in the assignment that she didn't have ready. And that night, John died, and she didn't go to school the next day. And the guilt she held for years over the intensity of that wish. So when I needed a reason for Annie to venture out, to leave things for a while, to want to put things behind her, to be willing to get on board a flight for India by herself, I saw how quickly those stories came back to me of Dolph and John and Jenny. But there's so much more than tragedy in this. I also wanted to share the wonder of maypoles and winding maypoles and village women's cooperatives, of biosand water filter projects, and why Annie had to make one diffuser plate all by herself to leave in Chinnikadu, the village. I wanted to talk about a fiery young woman named Vidya who just wanted to reform things, and a boy, Aziz, who just wants some good boulders to climb, or maybe some old stone buildings to climb. So yes, we get to have those adventures. We get to go to India. We get to do this with some really awesome teens, and you don't have to climb stone buildings to do it. So that's the fun of a good book. But I want to explore some questions together. If we had all read the book, I would want to ask you, what about this rang true for you? What was similar to some experiences you had? Or what about this was jarring to you? But I think today what I would like to do, or what caught you off guard? What did you not expect? But there are a couple of questions that I think would be fun for us to talk about. And that is, what experiences of religious diversity have you had? And would you describe the impact on your life as helpful or difficult or both? So let's think about that, and then I'm just going to ask another one too in a minute. You can have that kind of going in the back of your mind. Is it important for us to purposefully explore religious diversity? And asking this group, I can guess what your answer might be, but if you are a teen, and I wondered if we might have some teens or preteens with us today, I wanted to ask them, but I will ask us, is that a good time in your life for exposure and exploration? Because some adults would say you haven't had time to be anchored in your own tradition long enough to leap into others with enthusiasm or even curiosity. So is that true? Is there a time that it's not right to explore? Or, and I remember sharing this question with some people. One woman said, well, maybe in utero you should wait till they're babies before you start doing that. She was a librarian and she knew books. But anyway, I do want us to explore those thoughts. So can you share with me your thoughts about the first. Is there an experience of diversity, especially religious diversity, in your happenings, your days, that you think really had an impact?
I was raised Catholic, Catholic school, every Sunday service for years, and I never connected with it. Mother Mary was the closest to an entity that I could even consider, and I won't go too deep with this. In between third and fourth grade, I was down at the school, and it summer, so nobody was there, and a little boy asked me if I knew how babies were born.
Oh no.
And I, of course, didn't. I was just shocked at the question. It like dumbfounded. And I won't get in, and then I understood, and I was obsessed because I felt guilty because I knew that, which is very Catholic. Like, the guilt is how they control everything. So, so for a year in fourth grade, I would go to the church during recess and lunch, and no one was in there, and I would pray so hard to please help me get rid of these bad thoughts. And of course, nothing happened. This is weird. So in my passion, I decided to just give it all up. Like, God wasn't answering me, and I don't believe in it anyway. So I went up to the altar, which you're not supposed to touch, and I touched everything. And then I lit every candle in the church, like everyone. And this is intense. Then I put holy water in my mouth, and I spit it on the stairs as I left the church.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and that was it for me. Like, that was the end of organizing. I know, it's good intense. But anyway, that's been my experience with religion, and coming to UU was the first time ever that I felt in kindred spirits in spirituality. So that's
Thank you for sharing
that. You said that was fourth grade. That's impressive.
that. And a clear memory for you. So,
Yeah. I was discommunicating myself. It was a big deal.
Wow.
Anyways.
Well, mine was Southern Baptist, but along those lines, I mean, I was inundated with it. We went to church every time the doors opened, and I was this little kid who liked to be up front, and so sometimes they would let me preach or sing or, quote Bible verses or do whatever. And I got saved when I was 7 in a church service that my Fire and Brimstone Baptist uncle was preaching. And when I walked down the aisle, emotional and crying, because I was ashamed to go down the aisle because I had friends in the church and they had never gone down the aisle, and I was very concerned about what they would think. And so my uncle caught me and raised me up in the air and said, "A child for Jesus." And then he took my hands and started to look in my hands and told the people that I was a child healer. And for years, that man took me around with him to his little country churches, many Sunday mornings, and had me lay my hands on people, and he would get behind me and speak in tongues. And it was, now I know that was abuse. I don't know why my parents let that happen. They seemed to know what was happening and just didn't say much about it. But I really tried to keep all of that a secret from my friends and so on, because once they got word of it, I was not at all popular. I was not invited to parties. I was weird. And so I had this really weird connection with all of that until I met the man I married, who was an atheist. And so I immediately decided that, like Susie, that I was done with all of that. and I wanted the furthest thing from it, and atheism seemed like it to me. So pretty much stayed away from all church, all spiritual happenings for the 12 years I was married to him. And when I left him, the first thing I wanted to do was search and start seeking. And so, I mean, I've been involved in Hinduism, Buddhism, Native American stuff, New Thought. I actually got ordained as a New Thought minister. And then when they kicked me out, came to UU. And it's been, my experience and perception of what God is has definitely evolved over the years to a place now where it's the oneness, it's all there is. And as I look back on all of those religions that I immersed myself in, there's so much common ground. There's so much beauty in that I find that it really does help me conceive of what oneness really is all about.
The journey. So the question is, was the impact helpful or difficult? It was life for you.
Yeah, and I just figure that every encounter has been helpful. I mean, properly perceived, I feel like it's not a gift.
Let's see, the story of a girl traveling and being exposed to other cultures made me think of when I went to visit a friend of mine in the Czech Republic. He was, he was a childhood friend. We grew up together. He was teaching and traveling around Eastern Europe, and went to visit him, and we got to see a catacomb of a small church in a small town outside of Prague, and it had the layers of bones and the skulls, and I just remember just being chilled and really really creeped out, and he was very wise and of course a history major, and he talked about how that those churches honored their dead that way. I mean, they didn't intend to like scare their parishioners or anything like that. It's just how they honored their dead, and I thought that's good. I can kind of see that perspective, but I always liked because I grew up Unitarian. I always liked the positivity and the openness and the inclusiveness of it, and just made me a little more thankful for my upbringing. But at the same time, so many cultures celebrate and honor their traditions in different ways. So it was a good eye opener uh, to embrace that kind of diversity and to observe how different cultures honor their dead and that type of thing.
To be exposed to something and to
Mhm.
find it jarring
Mhm.
and yet informing,
Mm-hmm.
and then to bring you back to the point where I'm glad I had a different way of looking at things broadly.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Kathleen lost her son again.
I know. It's like
It's
Yeah.
over there, but because someone moving around brings
that's okay.
Well, I've had experience what we would call diversity. To me, it wasn't because I was a part of it. It wasn't diverse at the time. In my own mind, when I was in the late 50s, early 60s, my parents went to Unitarian Universalist Church. Unitarian, I think it was still then. And I didn't really mix in the Sunday school. It was boring, and I'd go in and listen to the sermon and wiggle around. So I really didn't take much, there was nothing there. I mean, I was pretty much a blank slate religiously. And my mom wanted some religion, and so she went seeking religion of her mother, which we had adopted later in life, Christian Science. So we went to Christian Science church for a year or so. I didn't really form any connections there either. I didn't memorize the scientific statement of being, and read the Hebrew scriptures and did the study, and it was all very involved in their reasoning. But we just kind of didn't, neither Mom or I landed there. And then the Mormon missionaries. Oh yeah, Mom hired a bookkeeper that was a Mormon for the business, tried to run the business, and so they got married, and she joined the Mormon church. I joined the Mormon church first. The missionaries came, taught the lessons, and I was all in. Here was a plan of the universe, how it begins and ends, and that's just laid out great. We've got the restoration, the gospel's been restored, and prophet on the earth, and there's girls. So I was very lonely socially. My parents were divorced, and this new guy was a jerk. But so I dove into the Mormon church head first. Bam! I was approved of, and I believed as much as anyone, as much as I could believe. I believed, and I stopped believing when I was 40. So I voted for Ronald Reagan. I supported Jolene in going to anti-abortion rallies when the Equal Rights Amendment was up. And so that was me. That was really, as much as I could be that, I was that. I wore garments, went to the temple. I was the guy that knew the scriptures in our local, in Yamhill, Carlton Ward. I was in it. I was headed to be, in leadership. But Jolene wasn't suited to be a Mormon, being gay. And so that all kind of came to an end. But what it did for me, your question, how did that diverse? It left me with compassion.
Another sentence or two.
Good. My former self and those that are continue to be like me.
Because living that, knowing how sincere and devout you were,
Exactly.
that you felt it, and you see that in others.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to be a smarmy pain in the ass with we're the only true religion. But one thing that started to break me loose was the us and them. That it was just too small of a world. And I wanted, I like to play and get out and, just be big world, not little world. And it was a little world. But I was in it till I was 40. Okay, from 14 to 40. It wasn't like I got unhappy right away. I lived it. And we had 3 children with the Mormons and 4.
Are your children still Mormons?
No.
Okay.
No, none of them.
Have they pursued other religions?
Well, diversity. Jed married a Catholic, and she's not very, but her parents are. They kind of control her daughter, and so Cormac, the grandson, has been to the catechism and those things.
Right.
They're kind of holding the form of it,
Right.
but I never see any real belief going on in the home.
Ex-Catholics generally search and search and search like their whole lives.
Megan's
yeah.
not searching. She's just kind of holding
Yeah.
with, I don't know what they do. She does for her own spirituality. Eli, college professor, married another professor, they just mostly wrangle kids and both have professor jobs. They don't really think about spirituality much. And Mary and Ryan, Ryan was raised pretty Christian, I think, in Cresswell, Oregon, small town. He brought a lot of that, but he got his head turned around in college. You know, like, whoa, there's a lot different way to be than I was at Cresswell. And so he makes a pretty good match. For Mary, we all pretty much turned out like my parents. Liberal, UU-ish. And that just kind of just how it all turned out, even though I did this heavy duty womanism.
Moved into another
Yeah,
way.
but your question was, it leaves me with compassion. And I have to keep reminding myself because it can be very irritating when people are certain about what I should be doing.
Yeah.
But I was there.
The other question, and maybe I'd launch it with Eric too, was what about youth? You said you had reflections then that you were grateful for this upbringing that you had.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a time when it's good, it's best for youth to be exposed to diversity, and how is that done? Or do they need to anchor? I know I remember one time after we had searched and been church hopping in our journey trying to find the perfect fit, and then apologizing to Penny, our daughter, saying, I'm so sorry I didn't find you before when you guys were little, and you wouldn't have had to go through all this. And she said, Mom, don't think you have to apologize. Then I would have grown up believing that that's the only way, But I mean, that was said, maybe not realizing that there was a breadth of, and it's not the only way. But still, how do you best encourage youth to curiosity rather than judgmentalism, to wondering rather than certainty, or is that valid?
For me, just with two kids, of looking at the two, it feels like, one has absolutely no curiosity about it at all. He's just like, and he has certainty, and he's had it since he was born, kind of thing. So, going to UU where you are, not presented with, but you're encouraged to have that curiosity. I mean, I don't think it really took. So it feels like that's almost like a personality characteristic in some way. And then, with the other one, with Nathan, he would explore anything and would be curious about anything. And so it feels like there's part of that as a personality trait. But I think with what I loved about UU and with the kids is that they do try to encourage that curiosity, and that there is one way and this is the way and you shall believe, and because that's something that I never would take to. So I don't know. I think, and at times I've thought, I wonder what I would have turned out like if my parents had gone, if they were in like an extreme, like fundamental religion. Like, I wonder if I would have been one of those extreme fundamentalists. I really do, because I just, I kind of dive in deep with things, and and again, I think it's kind of like going to the compassion that you're talking about, Ken. Of it's like, if I were in their shoes, maybe I would be. Who knows? But it's interesting, I think, to think about, and helpful to think about.
And for you to be able to project even wonder about that question, what would I have been like with a different background, and how hard would it have been for me to be okay?
Yeah, I think on the one hand, UU youth are in a really good position because, I mean, we're open to other faiths, and we've even had our youth group attend different services of different churches, or a Jewish synagogue, listen to presenters on Hinduism and Islam, things like that, which is great. but I also think that UU youth have a dilemma that, and we talked about this in our youth group in the past, where there isn't a scripture, there isn't a a strong, firm foundation because we're so open. So I think we had a youth group talk about like articulating their own faith, and I think that was a really helpful discussion. This was like the DeMarco era, if you guys remember the DeMarco kids, and the discussions were really interesting because I mean there was one young girl in her early teens that said I remember her saying, "I think God is a big wolf," and talked all about how this wolf deity, it her faith is constructed around it, and it was just so neat to hear everybody's different perspective and ideas, and of course all the kids were really supportive of her, and had a lot of good questions for her and things. So but it is tough for youth to articulate UU youth to articulate their faith because there's no like firm answer, and a scripture to draw on, a firm, like tradition and things. So you're growing up, UU, it was kind of hard for me, but you're always searching, you're always listening and things. You're open, but there is that drawback of not having that firm foundation.
Somebody just tell me.
Yeah, where are the answers?
Right. Adult UUs have trouble
I
articulating.
that's
Yeah,
exactly what I
Religion
thought. Yeah,
and
it's
our
like, well,
religious
so what do you
beliefs.
use believe? Well,
Mhm.
we're not Bible. We don't really the Bible. That's not what oh God, no.
Yeah, it's easier to tell what
What
we're
we are.
not
Yeah.
than what we are.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I brought some books along to show, and I think some of the reason, like this one, Lila's Lunchbox, is a story of a little girl experiencing or so excited because it's the first time she is fasting for Ramadan. But she has moved from, and I wasn't sure if it was Dubai or somewhere where her friends were, to the U.S., where it looked like she forgot her lunch, and that maybe kids should share their sandwich with her, and and how that works. And that's a story specifically that exposes you to the traditions in a faith that I love. And the woman who was here, I said, Tilbury House has books that are multicultural. They're a great place to check out. But then I got to thinking too, this book, Duck and Rabbit, it is, is this a duck or is this the rabbit? And you go through the whole story that way with these voices,
Mhm.
No, it's a rabbit. He's about to eat a carrot. And, before that it was a duck about to eat a piece of bread,
Mhm.
And so I wondered if some of these books that aren't about a religion, but are about perspectives and how viewpoints vary, might be as firm a foundation in diversity as anything specific might be. And when I was gathering books to bring, I thought, well, like this one, A Winter's Candle, tells about how families on several floors of this building end up sharing the candle in their tradition and what it does to bring them together. And it's a beautiful story. And the goat lady, this old woman needed to clean up her yard, get the goats under better control so they weren't getting out of the fence. And then they realized that she's been, providing milk to people with allergy problems and helping. I mean, they find out her story and it's like, whoa, we're so lucky she's in our community. And Enemy Pie, probably my favorite, children's book, is just about getting to know somebody and how they change from being your enemy to your, dear friend. So
I remember you did that first story for all ages several years ago, and I mean, there's not many books I remember well, but I still remember that so
that's
clearly.
so fun.
It's a wonderful book.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Kathy, you wrote the Mighty Case Against War there, right?
Yes.
And did you write Playing War?
Yes.
Yeah. And are there any more up there that you wrote?
Those on that side are all books that I've done.
If you choose not to fit, you wrote that?
Yeah, that's a kid's toolbox of problem solving. For me, the conflict resolution and the diversity thing just fit because that's why we have conflict. People have different ideas about things. And if there are ways of working through that conflict, then, and that little book, The Mediators, it shows how kids become curious about why did you do that? What were you thinking? And and mediation is like I say in that it could change the way the whole world is, and you can help make the change. But I found then this was up on my top shelf, folk tales from Indian folk tales, and I thought I couldn't even reach it to read to my grandkids. And so I don't necessarily incorporate the stories like I think I need to be on the lookout for more stories but I recently found a story that I had a really hard time with that was my son mentioned that it was one he got on the trains when they bring in the big basket and sell these little books for, and then probably 10 rupees or something, but less than $1. But I just thought, oh man, this is so complicated, and all these names for God and all these violent things these gods do. And then I think, I felt that way sometimes about the stories in the Old Testament, and so it's not that I just like, come on, you guys, we got it all, anything works out. I still have struggles with how things are, but I think I have found that when the people are there in your heart, that two families, one heart, that some of the struggles and details can maybe just not be worked out that day, and you can sit down together and have dinner and talk as best you can in your languages. I wanted to just ask, does it matter that we have Bob and we have Farad on the Davenport? First of all, I wanted our little kids to become familiar with Penny's dear friend in India that rescued her doll in the village from the boys who took it away, and they stayed friends for years and years and years, and would be still if they could get together, I know. So I thought, well, why not have a little girl doll that's named Farad? And then I got to thinking, the very first doll I remember having, and the little doll that I loved all my life growing up, that was in the dress that Granny crocheted for me for her, I still have her.
Wow.
And I can't give her away, and I'll never give her away. And the rubber has, hardened, and I think one leg cracked off and stuff. But she was precious. Her name is Amos Sandra, and you got her through the Amos and Andy show on the radio. And I don't even know if that show was great or not great, but it was.
Doesn't hold up.
Doesn't hold up?
No.
Absolutely not.
But anyway, my parents took the opportunity to buy me an Amos Samuel doll, and I loved her. Did this make any difference? I don't know that she was a precious little doll to me. So I think there are things like that that we just need to question and ask and think how we do present diversity. This that book, Operation Marriage, I think this is a fun one to read to kids, and it talks about the struggle that, or the camaraderie that these kids are developing as they're planning for their mother's wedding, and it's happening kind of when time is of the essence before laws will change and they can't get married and stuff.
Oh, wow.
So just, I think having ideas, are important. Another theme in the book is just something that Mr. Snyder did with the kids. He was a pretty creative teacher. That was the one that had them write this essay that Annie entered in one. But he kept a hedgehog in his bottom drawer. And when the kids did something that they were proud of or worthy about, they got to pet the hedgehog. And bring friends to watch them pet the hedgehog. and I just thought, I love the theme of affirmation too. So when we did a book club at our home, the kids let me get out of order. We have a family book club, one every winter. And I said, you guys, Encounter is just out. Can I please have a turn out of order? And they said, yeah. We did this hedgehog activity where you just pair up with somebody else and ask them what they're proud of, and then let them, I have another hedgehog too, let them pet the hedgehog as they tell. So keeping in mind that idea of taking time to affirm each other, think of what we're, pleased about in our lives. I have at least postcards that I would like each of you, because we've talked about this together, to take and maybe share with a friend or something. And then I do have copies of this book, and then I just brought my other books so that you can see, or whatever. If you choose not to hit, basically Kids Problem Solving Cookbook or Toolbox, playing more. My reaction to a neighbor kid who is really awesome saying to me, Kathy, I wish they had a war for kids, a real one, because we could be anybody big time. And then another kid just a few days later saying, do you know where I could get that? And I don't know if it was shirt or the hat, anyway, to finish out my camouflage outfit, because I really want to be in a war. And I thought, what are we telling kids? That isn't the truth. They don't really want to be in a real war. So that book became, in those quotes, one of those quotes is just what this little kid says. I have a book, The Oregon Story, The Indian Wars, The Oregon Story, that I pulled out of the chapter A Mighty Case Against War. And then the little book, The Mediators, that someday I will, actually, we did a program on mediation at a Simplified service. I think, can you help me with that?
Yeah, I remember
And
that.
I just think that's a treasure yet to be tapped into, to help kids always have a way of problem solving. And why isn't it as important in school as reading and math and other things? Problem solving is a big scope. So those are things that we can look at afterwards. And thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting
Thank
me.
you.
Thank
for
you
shedding
very
your
much.
light, Kathy.
Yes.
Really nice.
Thank you.
Okay. How much are the books?
These are 15.
Okay.
But I have to tell you, I don't know why. And for any of you who buy on Amazon, I'll mention this. For those of you who don't, and I didn't do it, go to Third Street Books. They have it for cheaper than I can buy it as the author. So
Wow.
anyway, I don't know why. But
Yeah.
anyway, today it's $15.
Okay.
And that's that's a good price.
There's no way to buy it other than cash.
I have a sign up and an envelope where you send me a check later.
Oh, good.
if you want
Okay.
to do that. Yeah.
She takes
And-
credit. That's good.
Mhm.
And because I don't have one of those scanners
Squares.
that people
Yeah,
use.
I would like to do that.
I'd love to have that.
Okay.
Well, Kathy, I'll just stand up and do the official. Thank you. For so many things today, you stimulated us in so many ways. I really need to find out what happened to the corn days. That was really
Yeah.
a good thing.
Good.
And then how you got us to have such a wonderful discussion that was such on point, and it brought out some amazing things we heard today. So you really did realize us this beautiful woman. Thank you so much.
So glad I could
I was so
join you.
excited when I saw your name.
Uh,
I really was. I was just like, oh, because the last time I saw you was the TED Talk. It was a long time
I
ago.
know,
Mhm,
and I
mhm.
was so afraid of COVID. I just stayed away
Yeah.
for so long.
Yeah.
So.
Sure.
Understandable.
Anything else before we do close announcements? What's going on? What's next week?
Will Horniak.
Whoa!
Storyteller.
Good
Yeah.
summer.
Yeah, the storyteller. Oh wow,
I can do a cares and concerns report.
that'd be lovely.
So Rob Tanner is in the hospital, and he is not doing well. I don't know how. I had a long talk with Rosie yesterday. I don't know how much of this she would want me to share, but he still has his gallbladder, and he has a very extensive infection throughout his whole abdomen, and they're giving him intravenous antibiotics, and his white cell count is very low. He is in the local hospital and would, according to Rosie, really appreciate having guests.
So he's
Um,
at Willamette Valley.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the hospital here in town. And let's see, I talked to Denise this morning. She has had COVID this last week, and
No.
that was not a good thing for her, and it's left her very tired and debilitated. So, one more layer for Denise.
Yeah.
And Linda Warner's doing great.